Kicks in Pankration are something I've always found intriguing and perplexing. On one hand, you only have a handful of vases depicting them, all 7 of which from the exact same time period, 500 to 475 BCE, versus thousands upon thousands depicting hand strikes and grappling. But on the other hand, look at these stances. There's no way kicks weren't prevalent. And the topic is extremely important because leg strikes and groundwork were the 2 aspects of combat that differentiated Pankration from other combat sports of that era. So I set out to research this subject, and in 2023 it was the topic of my first formal academic publication in the International Journal of the History of Sport. Prior to this study, there were only 5 ancient Greek terms related to kicking that you could find in any other work of modern literature, academic or commercial. I was able to increase this number from 5 to 23. We have 5 general terms, 7 core kicking techniques, 6 footwork variants, and 5 kicking targets. And these were all found in ancient Greek text. In other words, what we can't find in vase depictions, we find in the rich literature that survived the cultural onslaught inflicted on ancient Greek heritage. In this video, I'll give you a quick rundown of each term and how they translate to modern combat sport applications. So, to the subject matter. The term for kicking was generally laktizin, with lax being the root, meaning either foot or foot strike. Interestingly enough, there also existed a general term for counter kicking called anti-laktizin. Now, similar to hand strikes, there is a vector of force generated by each individual technique, both in direction and in magnitude. Let's take the front kick as a first example. In terms of direction, depending on how you execute the front kick, it could either be a horizontal force or an upward force. Hence, we have different types of front kicks. One is the jab, meant to both pierce and push the target. This technique was called tiptin. Next, the push kick. Again a horizontally applied force, but this time meant to push through the target. This was called apolaktizin. Another is the up kick, meant to pierce, but it strikes at an upward angle. This was named analaktizin. A fourth alternative is the front kick aimed low, though all low kicks were classified under one term, hypolaktizin. However, there was a specific term for striking the shin, and that was called andiknimiazin. Another low kick that was likely used frequently is the roundhouse, given that a commonly found Pankration stance includes elements to check this kick. The roundhouse in general was called dialaktizin, but specifically hitting the thigh had its own term, merizin. What's strange is that this technique is not found in any surviving ancient Hellenic pottery, and I believe it's either due to limitations in the painting techniques for the medium, or because of the unpopularity of the strike, since these vases were meant to be sold to spectators. All kicks are shown countered or dodged, like in this vase, where a kick was chosen to differentiate Pankration from boxing to its left and wrestling to its right. Wouldn't it be nice to see this incredibly rare vase in person? It displays not only all 3 combat sports of the ancient games, but is also one of only a handful of surviving pottery with a kicking technique. Well, guess what? You can't see it in person. According to the database where I found it, this vase was last seen in a market's auction house in Switzerland. Best believe I have choice words for the seller, the buyer, and the government of Switzerland for allowing the auction of ancient antiquities that belong in a museum. But, speaking of disdain, perhaps the most hated technique by viewers of the ancient Hellenic era, so much so that it drew the ire of even philosophers, was the back kick, called eklaktizin. The back kick was an extremely powerful tool for Pankration's rule set, because of how effective it was at stopping an incoming opponent, whether he be running, dashing, or even in the air. In other words, it would have been used defensively, and because the kick is similar to the strike of an equine species, there were scholars that would basically equate Pankratiasts to donkeys. A different yet also important strike used at various heights and ranges is the side kick, which was called pternizin. The side push kick variant was referred to as apopternizin. Knee strikes were also used, albeit rarely depicted or referenced, and were called gonatizin. The reason for this infrequency of knees and elbow strikes is due to Pankration utilizing large, unbounded arenas, so fights in the pocket would be rare in comparison to today. Altogether, these were the primary techniques, but there are also kicks tied to footwork. Depending on the lead up to the strike, the strength and efficacy of the attack will differ, and because footwork was the most valued aspect of combat according to ancient Hellenic sources, the striking component was left unnamed in their terminology. Instead, the footwork component was named, and was followed only by the general term for kicking, which is lax. So, let me give you an example. When I say step kick, what type of kick usually comes to mind? Probably just the front kick, right? But the term step kick can refer to other attacks as well, like step side kick. In ancient Greece, the type of kick didn't matter. It was never referenced beyond just kick, as only the footwork term was stated. For step kick, we have lagvenin, and the sliding or otherwise called dashing or lunging kick was called lax eporuin. Accordingly, we have the aerial kicks, though even these differ depending on the type of jump. When leaping in place, this was called empidan lax, but when the jump was accompanied by forward momentum, the term differed and was instead called lax enaleste. Now, there are a few more things I should mention in terms of the findings. I was able to locate another term, one for the axe kick, called katalaktizin, but was only able to do so in a 13th century source of the Common Era, so I didn't include it in the study because I considered it to be too recent. However, the likelihood of the term and technique existing in ancient Hellenic sources that have since been lost still remains high. In addition, it's not out of the question that kicks to the head were deemed illegal in ancient Olympic competition. There did exist a term for such attacks called miktirizin, but I haven't found the source tying it specifically to striking prior to the 2nd to 3rd century of the Common Era, since it was also used metaphorically before that. Again, the likelihood of empiricus taking this term from an ancient source that no longer exists is high, but the possibility that the meaning of the word changed is also non-zero. Another term meant to describe a strike that lands at a specific target was gastrizin, which you may have heard of from Human Weapon or basically any commercial book on Pankration, as they all have it as a front kick. However, the term does not necessarily describe a kick at all. The root of gastrizin is gastra, which means belly, and the term could be used to denote any sort of strike landing on the midsection. It was used to describe a kick in many cases, but that doesn't mean that it was a front kick, and that doesn't mean it couldn't be used to denote a punch to the belly as well. Once again, I've only given a short rundown of Pankration's kicking techniques in this video. Other than the article, I will expand on the topic significantly in the book. Hopefully, I'll have the means to finish it in time and have it published by the academic institution. If you'd like to help in this regard, you can do so via Patreon or via direct PayPal contribution. Links are below. I will follow this up with a review of another video on Pankration's kicking techniques in the near future, so stay tuned. Until then.